I've never thought of myself as a jealous or possessive man. That was part of why polyamory worked so well for us. For 16 years, Lori and I built something special, something unconventional, sure, but strong and full of love. When we met Kyle and Andy, everything seemed to fall into place. Our lives intertwined, children came into the picture, and our family grew in ways most people wouldn't understand. But now, I find myself in a position I never imagined, standing alone in a house filled with people I love, yet feeling utterly alienated. And it all boils down to Joseph. For years, he was nothing more than a peripheral figure, Kyle's old college friend, Andy's occasional fling, a familiar face in our bed every now and then. I tolerated him, accepted him even, because at the end of the day, he was just part of the dynamic. He was never a permanent fixture. At least, he wasn't supposed to be. Then the accident happened. Joseph's motorcycle crash changed everything. He lost his job, his apartment, and nearly his life. Kyle, always the bleeding heart, insisted we take him in just for a little while, just until he got back on his feet. And I, not wanting to be the heartless guy who turned away an injured friend, agreed. I told myself it was temporary. I repeated it like a mantra whenever he got on my nerves. But now, a year and a half later, he's still here. And worse, he's managed to weave himself so deeply into our lives that I don't know if we'll ever untangle from him. 3 days ago, Lori sat me down for what she called a serious talk. I knew right away that something was off. She fidgeted, avoiding my eyes, biting her lip in that nervous way she does when she knows I won't like what she has to say. Finally, after much dancing around the subject, she came out with it. She wanted to have another baby. But not just any baby. Joseph's baby. I stared at her, waiting for her to laugh, to tell me this was some kind of weird joke. But she didn't. "Lori," I said, carefully measuring my words, "we have 6 kids in this house already. I thought we were done having children." She shrugged. "I just feel like it's only fair. Andy has a child with each of you. I want that too. And Joseph feels like he's missing something. He doesn't have a child with me." Something in me snapped. Since when do we make babies to appease someone's feelings? I wasn't just mad, I was stunned. This wasn't about love, or deep connection, or even an accident like some of our other pregnancies. This was about fairness, about making sure Joseph didn't feel left out. That was the moment I realized just how deep he'd sunk his hooks into our family. The truth is, I never really liked Joseph. There was always something off about him, a vibe I couldn't shake. He was one of those guys who always seemed just a little too slick, a little too rehearsed, like he was constantly selling you something. And now, he was selling himself as an irreplaceable part of our family. He drinks too much. He makes offhanded, borderline, bigoted comments that make me uncomfortable. And worst of all, I just don't trust him. But I never made a fuss. I let him stay. I let him be part of things. I kept my mouth shut, telling myself it wasn't worth the fight. Now, I wish I had. Because if Lori has his baby, he's never leaving. And that thought makes me feel something I haven't felt in years. Real, burning, violent anger. Kyle and Andy think it's sweet, even romantic. Andy cooed about how beautiful it was that we were all so connected. Kyle patted Joseph on the back, congratulating him before anything had even happened. And all I could do was sit there, seething. I wanted to punch him, to drag him out of my house and throw him onto the street, to tell him that he was never supposed to be part of this family, that he was an outsider, a guest who had overstayed his welcome. But if I said that, I knew exactly what would happen. Lori would call me controlling. Kyle and Andy would tell me I was being unfair, that I was the one causing problems. The man who had opened his heart and home for over a decade would suddenly be the selfish villain. And maybe they'd be right. Because the truth is, I don't just want to say no to this baby. I want Joseph gone. The tension in our house has been suffocating ever since that conversation. Lori, Kyle, and Andy keep trying to talk to me about it, hoping I'll come around. Joseph, meanwhile, acts like nothing's changed, like he's already won. And maybe he has. Because no matter how I look at this, I see no way out that doesn't end in disaster. If I say yes, Joseph cements his place in our family forever. I'll have to look at that smug face every day, knowing he's won. If I say no, I become the bad guy, the one who ruined everything. I love my family. I love the life we built together. But I don't think I can do this. And what scares me most is that, for the first time in 16 years, I'm not sure our love is enough to fix this. Just when I thought all was lost, Joseph did something I never saw coming. He took my side. It happened last night, completely out of the blue. I was bracing for another round of guilt tripping when Joseph sat down across from me, looking uncomfortable. "I've been thinking," he said, rubbing the back of his neck. "And maybe this isn't such a good idea." I almost laughed. "No kidding. I mean it," he insisted. "I don't want to cause problems between you and Lori. I don't want to be the reason your family falls apart." I studied him, trying to find the angle, the trick. But for once, he looked sincere. "You actually mean that?" He nodded. "Yeah, I do." And just like that, the pressure lifted. I don't know if I'll ever fully like Joseph. I don't know if I'll ever stop resenting the way he wove himself into our lives. But for the first time, I felt something close to gratitude toward him. Maybe he finally realized what I already knew. That love isn't about fairness, and families aren't built on keeping score. Maybe, just maybe, we dodged a bullet. What do you do when every other member of your family wants to include a new person into the family, but you don't? That question has been weighing heavily on me for a long time. I want to thank everyone who shared their thoughts. Your comments were helpful, and I genuinely appreciate the different perspectives. For now, I need to step away and think things through. I have a long night ahead of me, and I won't be responding any longer. But one thing is clear: I need to speak up, even if it's too late, even if the damage is already done. Some things simply need to be said, no matter the consequences. When I got home, I knew I couldn't avoid this any longer. I found Lori in the kitchen, humming softly to herself as she prepared dinner. The sight of her, so at ease, so unaware of the storm that was about to hit, made my chest tighten. But I had to do it. "We need to talk," I told her. "Seriously. Before there's any more talk about babies." She looked at me, her expression shifting from warmth to wariness. She knew. She always knew when something was bothering me. But before she could ask questions, I told her I had also spoken to Andy and Kyle, asking them to meet with me in the morning. "We need to discuss Joseph," I said. At the mention of his name, her body tensed. I knew this wouldn't be easy, but I couldn't keep pretending I was okay with everything that was happening. I made it clear that I didn't want to have this conversation in front of the kids. I wanted to wait until the morning, until Joseph was at his rehab visit and the older kids were off to school. She didn't argue. She just nodded. And that's when I knew tomorrow would change everything. The next morning, I sat across from Lori, Andy, and Kyle, my hands clenched into fists on the table. I had spent the entire night running through this conversation in my head, trying to find the right words. But now that I was here, all I felt was exhaustion. I took a deep breath and said what I needed to say. "I need to clear the air about my feelings for Joseph," I began. "We have never gotten along, and I've always viewed his presence here as temporary. I still do. I can't support any moves to make him a permanent part of this family." Silence. Heavy, suffocating silence. Then Andy and Kyle exchanged a look before Andy finally spoke. "Well," he said slowly, "we were actually going to bring this up today anyway." And then, just like that, they dropped the bombshell. After Laura's announcement about wanting another baby, they had been discussing the possibility of formally committing to Joseph, making him a permanent part of the family through a commitment ceremony. I felt like I had been punched in the stomach. I reminded them of the agreement we had all made long ago, that any new additions to the family had to be unanimously agreed upon. And I made it crystal clear that I would never agree to this. What followed was an explosion of emotions. They called me selfish. They said I was being unreasonable. They even had the audacity to suggest that the three of them could hold the commitment ceremony without me. That was when I snapped. I looked them straight in the eyes and said, "Understand that if you do this, you're not talking about adding someone new to the family. You're talking about replacing me with him. I can't stay in a family that would hurt and disrespect me like that." Lori flinched as if I had physically struck her. Andy and Kyle just stared at me, their anger momentarily silenced by the weight of my words. I turned to Lori next, my voice softer, but just as firm. "I love you," I told her, "but it breaks my heart that you want to have a child with someone I can't stand." She opened her mouth to protest, but I continued. "Joseph asked you to have a child for his ego, and you're actually considering it. A child is not a bargaining chip, Lori. A child should be created out of love, not out of obligation or some twisted sense of fairness." Tears streamed down her face as she shook her head. "That's not fair," she whispered. "I love you both. I shouldn't have to choose." But she did. Because in refusing to choose, she was making a choice. Then she said something that made my blood run cold. She offered to make the baby's paternity a matter of chance, going off birth control and sleeping with both Joseph and me, letting fate decide. I felt sick. "That is unacceptable," I told her. "I am your husband. I am your family. He is not. If you go through with this, it will be the end of us." And with that, I walked away. The hours that followed were a blur. I went to work, but my mind was elsewhere. When I came home that evening, I braced myself for another fight. Instead, I was met with an unexpected surprise. Joseph wanted to talk. I was prepared for anger, for arrogance, for another attempt to manipulate the situation. What I wasn't prepared for was an apology. He admitted that we had never liked each other. He acknowledged that he had been selfish. And for the first time, he actually seemed to care about something other than himself. He told me he loved his son, that he loved being around him every day, that the thought of going back to only seeing him once a week was unbearable. I had never considered that side of it before. And then he made an offer that I never saw coming. He decided to move out. Not because anyone forced him to, not because I demanded it, but because he realized that staying would only cause more harm. There was an apartment complex just 2 blocks away, and he planned to move there once he secured a job. In the meantime, he could still visit, still be a father, but without disrupting my marriage. For the first time in years, I saw Joseph not as an adversary, but as a man trying to do the right thing. That night, Lori and I held each other in silence. No words, no accusations. Just the quiet understanding that things had to change. She read everything I had written about this situation. Every raw, painful thought I had poured into the void of the internet. And she cried. She apologized. She told me she still loved me. And she asked me not to discuss this anymore. Not online, not with strangers, not until we figured everything out. I agreed. This will be my last update. Things are still uncertain. Our family is shifting, evolving. But for the first time in a long time, I feel like we might actually find a way forward. Not perfect, not easy, but possible. And right now, that's enough. If Joseph does it right, he could still see his son 7 days a week, while I only have to deal with him for 2. It's a great solution that gives us both what we want. I get my space, and he gets to be a father without encroaching too much on my daily life. Plus, there's some good news. He's already told Lori that he doesn't want a baby with her. That whole issue is now off the table. I won't lie. Hearing him say that he had wanted to have a baby with Lori but didn't want to put her in the middle of a conflict stung. It confirmed what I already suspected. He wanted that connection, that permanence with her. And yet, he backed out when the situation got messy. Typical. Still, he admitted it over a beer, which honestly was a surreal moment. I didn't even complain when he handed me one of his piss water Coors Lights. Seriously, this guy really does fit certain stereotypes. My opinion of him shifted slightly, for the better, but only by a notch. Lori, on the other hand, was a mess for most of the day. The idea of having another baby was something she held onto tightly, and when Joseph took that off the table, it devastated her. Later that night, when we got home, she completely broke down. Tears, deep sighs, the kind of exhaustion that comes from carrying a silent heartbreak for too long. She told me just how much she wanted another baby, and how painful it was that neither Kyle nor I wanted one with her. But what hurt her the most? That neither of us had even noticed how deeply she was suffering over it. After hours of talking, more like unraveling years of hidden emotions, we reached a decision. We would have one more baby, but we would wait another year. And here's the kicker. She wants it to be mine, not Kyle's. Not Joseph's. Kyle has no problem with this arrangement at all, which is almost funny in a twisted way. This is where polyamory gets complicated, where the lines blur and emotions get tangled in ways that most people outside this kind of relationship would never understand. As for Joseph, well, that's another story. The commitment ceremony is completely off the table now, but Lori still wants to date him, to maintain their connection, just without the complications of pregnancy or deepening family ties. Love and sex, but no strings beyond what already exist. She wants sleep with him at our house. That was a condition I put down, and she agreed. But she will still see him. She will still go on dates, visit his place, and occasionally stay the night, maybe once a month. Am I thrilled about this? No, but this is what she wants. And if I truly love her, I have to find a way to be okay with it. But Andy? Andy is a different problem altogether. She's furious with me, and she's not backing down. I get it. Andy has had a relationship, both sexual and emotional, with Joseph since she was 21. He is the father of one of her children. To her, the idea of him officially becoming part of our family was something she was looking forward to, something she felt was right, and I took that away. Now, every interaction with her is tense. Cold stares, slammed doors, silence. Kyle told me last night that Andy even talked about leaving the family over this, moving in with Joseph. That hit me hard. He reassured me that it was just anger talking, that she wasn't actually serious. But still, the fact that she even said it, it speaks volumes. And in a way, I understand why she's mad. I forced her into an impossible situation. She loves Joseph. He is part of her life, just as he is part of Laura's. And yet, here I am, drawing lines in the sand, forcing choices that no one wants to make. I don't know how to fix this. All I know is that for the sake of our daughter, I have to try. Kyle, to his credit, admitted his own mistakes. He told me he knew that Joseph and I didn't get along. He apologized for not talking to me sooner, for not checking in to see if I was okay with everything before it spiraled into chaos. And you know what? He actually blamed himself for all the arguing. In his mind, it was his job to be the bridge, to smooth things over, because Joseph was his friend first, and I am his life partner. He thought he should have been the one to run interference before things got out of control. I told him not to worry about it, because at the end of the day, I should have spoken up sooner. We clinked our beers together. Sierra Nevada West Coast Porter this time. Much better taste. So, where do we go from here? I don't have a clear answer. I just know that relationships, especially in a household as intertwined as ours, are work. Constant, exhausting, emotionally charged work. But they're worth it. At least, I hope they are. I want to thank all of you for your insights, your commentary, and honestly, for putting up with my venting. Writing this all out, processing it before talking to my family, probably saved me from making some ugly comments and even uglier choices. Lori read through many of your comments, and she found them eye-opening too. She especially loved the thought that we're a tribe. And because someone requested it, we may come back and do an AMA about the emotional and family dynamics of living in a large polyamorous household. But for now, we need to finish working through this mess first. Much love to all of you. It's strange how friendships fall apart. How one moment you think you're part of something solid, and the next, you realize you were never really included at all. Greg was a friend, or so I thought. His wedding was a huge event, one that everyone in our circle was excited about. We all knew it was coming, and when the invitations went out, the excitement doubled. Except, I never got one. I still remember the gut punch of realizing I wasn't invited. Seeing the save the date magnets on everyone else's fridges, knowing there wasn't one for me. But I said nothing, because at the end of the day, weddings are their day, not mine. Still, it hurt. And then, a month before the wedding, I got a text from Greg. A last-minute invitation. No, save the date. No formal invite. Just a quick, almost obligatory text. At that point, I couldn't go. Work, finances, planning. Everyone else had a year to prepare. I had a few weeks. I texted back, saying I couldn't make it. Then the wedding happened, and I saw the pictures. The whole group, my friends, our friends, having the time of their lives. Except I wasn't there, and I started to wonder, had I ever really been part of the group at all? Then, as if to twist the knife, Shannon messaged me, "Why didn't you RSVP? We missed you." RSVP. Doesn't one have to be invited in order to RSVP? I wanted to scream, but instead, I played it cool. I apologized, complimented the wedding, made it easier for her because I knew if I spoke the truth, it'd be the bad guy. The truth? Greg never liked me, and he never wanted me there. Turns out, I was the only one who didn't realize it.